Hello there, fellow truth seekers. This is Doug coming to you once again on this here Shabbat. Today, I'm going to kind of do a little something different. I'm not going to really do study of the scriptures today. I just want to kind of talk about some of the current events and stuff that are going on. And do you see the things that are going on and what the ramifications of it is, and how it does tie in with biblical prophecy. But at the same time too, there's another thing I want to address, and I'm going to keep it short. I do not believe in reincarnation. That's straight out of the Hindu Vedas and Buddhism. And by the way, Buddhism came out of Hinduism. It was started over in northeastern India by the guy that become known as the Buddha. I would say his name, but it's about 3 feet long, so I'm not going to try. He was a prince, and he, still, most of the practices of Buddhism come right out of Hinduism. And of course, reincarnation is one of the basic tenets of their religion. I do believe in the resurrection of the dead, but I also know that Scripture tells us that there is no resurrection from the second death. Once you experience the second death, that's it. There is no resurrection from that. And of course, I'm not going to debate it. I'm not going to argue about it. I've got my belief, what I believe the Scripture says about it, and in Job, where he says, that he will allow these things 1, 2, 3 times. He's talking about in your life. I mean, if you look at Job, he was tried twice. The first time, all of his material possessions was taken from him, and he stayed faithful to Elohim. The second time, his health was taken from him, and he still stayed faithful. That doesn't mean he was reincarnated twice, and or anything like that. It just means that in our lifetimes, I'm an example of chastisement. 3 times I've been chastised in my life, and I know they were chastisements. Because the result was the same every time. And as far as what befell me, and of course the type of chastisement that that Elohim uses on us is different from one person to the next. I think it's based on what he knows is going to steer us in the right direction. And what was chastisement for me may be totally different for somebody else. And so this last time, of course, really got my attention, and no looking back, put it that way. And so I think that it's just talking about in our lives, he can bring trials on us and chastisements on us more than once. In order to lead us to the place where he wants us to be. I mean, it's just like me living where I'm living at now. If you'd asked me 15, 20 years ago, would I ever be living here, I'd have said, you're crazy. Why would I come here? Why would I, leave where I lived at, where there was tremendous opportunity and, money to be made? I mean, all that kind of stuff, worldly things. But I understand now that I was brought here to for one, to get me out of that mindset, and to understand, and I come out of poverty growing up. I mean, we were not, I'm not, didn't have a silver spoon in my mouth. We were pretty poor. And so, being that you're growing up in that kind of a situation, you have a tendency to want to get rich, and make lots of money, when you get grown, that's children thoughts. One day I'm going to, make $1 million and I'm going to have everything I ever wanted. Well, I never made $1 million, but I did make good money and had a lot of the things that I always desired. And in the end, I mean, when I began to see death around me, I mean, a granddaughter and my wife, that kind of stuff began to lose its luster because it couldn't bring them back. And, it can't bring anybody back. And so I think, coming up here, being led here for a reason. And one was to see, and to develop empathy, which I always had some empathy. I mean, for other people, because like I said, I grew up poor, but my mentality was, I did it. I crawled up out of it. They can. They can do better. They could. But unless you're walking in somebody else's shoes, you don't. You really don't understand their way of thinking and the life experience that they've had that shaped them to the person that they become. And what kind of traumas they experienced in their life that just maybe destroyed their motivation, and not just their personal experience, but the attack on humanity. I just seen and of course you have to take everything you see on YouTube. I mean, unless you vetted your sources, in other words, they have been consistently truthful, consistently right, then you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. You can't just buy into everything that somebody says on there. But a lady did an experiment with a popular brand of soda pop, and what she showed going on in that pop, these little microspheres or whatever it was in there that began to go and join together with each other and form these strands and these clumps in there. I mean, it was kind of spooky. And I'm thinking, man, why would anybody drink that stuff if they knew that was going on, that there was these, I don't know if there's some kind of nanobots or if it's just some kind of, maybe that, what is it, that new type of carbon, if I wasn't trying to think of it, I could think of it. But anyway, it's a real flat type of carbon that is made up of 6 carbon atoms to form a molecule, and it has a lot of really strange characteristics. What is it called? Well, anyway, when it's attacked, whenever you beam RF energy at this stuff, it does some strange stuff. I mean, it begins to move. It begins to act like something that's actually living or something. But I mean, I know it's not physically living, but the energy, that RF energy, like from a cell phone or whatever, when you put it close to it, it would start morphing. And so, are they putting something like that in there? And I've also come to understand that that's also some of the stuff that they're spraying up there in the upper atmosphere. Whenever they're doing this stratospheric aerosol injection, they're spraying that stuff up into the atmosphere. And of course, I think, and now even on the mainstream media, they're coming out and they're admitting that they're doing this cloud seeding, is what they call it, and this dimming, where they're trying to dim out the sun. And what gets me is here they are, they're promoting, trying to get everybody to get solar power, these solar panels and stuff. But if, what good are these solar panels going to be if you dim out the sun to where you got no sun? I mean, it's just another way to take and separate you from your money. which is their intent. Their intent is, if you look at the attack, the financial attack on Americans, and it's not just Americans, it's all over the world that they're doing it, with taxation. Now they're trying over there, I think it's Norway, they just passed a law where they're going to start implementing this carbon tax on people. $100 for every cow that they have. It's an attack on farmers. Then you look at what's going on up here in Idaho, where they are cutting off the water supply to these farmers up there. And they're cutting it off so that they can mine cobalt. And they use this cobalt in these batteries, these lithium-ion batteries and other technology that's to do with these EVs, these electric vehicles, which is just the idea behind that is to limit your ability to travel. And because you can take an internal combustion engine car and there's gas stations everywhere. So you can get in your car here and get on an interstate and drive from here to California or Oregon or wherever you want to go, and there's a ready supply of gasoline all along the way. But with the EVs, yeah, they're putting charging stations around, but they're, and the contrast is that, for example, Elon Musk that has Tesla, they took $1 billion and they were able to put several thousands of these superchargers all over, the interstate system. They mainly follow the interstates. The federal government is, put out or appropriated $7 billion for charging stations, and they produced 12 charging stations at a cost of $7 billion. Which goes to show you the government can never do anything efficiently as a private business can. So first off, the federal government should not be involved in anything that can be done by private business. The federal government was never intended, the way it was originally set up by the founders, was never intended to have any hand in any of it. What that amounts to is Nazism. You go look at what Nazism really is. It's a joining together of private business with the government regulating the private business. You still have these businesses operating as private businesses, but the government is controlling what they can produce, how much they can produce. As where in socialism or communism, it's a collective where the government owns everything and they control the means of production. Well, in Nazism, they don't control the means of production. They just regulate the means of production. The production is still done by private businesses. And they regulate what they can produce. What kind of technology, what kind of, So that's kind of where our government has wound up at, and it actually is sort of a hybrid of Nazism and communism. It's sort of like the two of them combined, because it has aspects of communism if you look at the way it's operating right now, and of course and this is something that a lot of people don't understand about it is that we think that we elect the president, and we don't. They're selected, because every president that we have ever had, with the exception of one, and I think that was James Madison, are direct descendants of King John Lackland, the one who wrote the Magna Carta over in England. They're descended from him. Even Barack Obama. All of them. Or they're all related. Which that ought to tell you something. I mean, that bloodline has been being handpicked for that position, going all the way back to when George Washington was selected. And so that ought to make you think that it's planned that way, that all of this is planned, that and it's been being planned for, I believe, thousands of years. I don't think it's just something that's relatively the modern era, from the 1600s forward or something like that. I believe it goes way back beyond that, probably all the way back to Babel. Their first attempt, at creating a world government and an empire, world empire. And these people tried ever since, but nobody's been able to be successful at it. The Babylonians tried, the Persians and the Medes tried, the Greeks tried, and they were already, for example, the Greeks, and of course, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but they went into India, and they went so far, and they wouldn't stop. But then when they started to progress further, according to writings of their generals and stuff, they were attacked by flying saucers. I mean, whether it's true or not, I don't know. I mean, but it's historical. I mean, in the accounts of it, and stampeded their animals. They had they had elephants and camels and other beasts of burden that were carrying their equipment and their food and that kind of stuff. I mean, it stampeded them. And when they went back across the river, I don't know if it was the Indus River or what river it was, but when they crossed that river is when they began to be attacked. And so these ideas, same with Rome, they were kind of hemmed in. I mean, they spread a certain amount. But for example, there in the Middle East, their biggest rivalry was with the Parthians, which was the Medes and the Persians and the Elamites. They were all one Parthian empire there, and that's the same ones that came over there to see the Messiah when he was after he had been born. They were always at odds with the Romans, and they continued to retake, one would retake an area, and then the Romans would regather and regroup, and then they would come and take a territory back, but they never really went further than the Levant. The Romans didn't. I mean, they did go over in Asia Minor, Eastern Turkey, over into Turkey and all, and the Constantinople and all that, but as far as down into the eastern part of the Middle East, over around Babylon, Babylon, down into the area of Persia and all, no, they never made it that far. And certain areas of northern Africa, like Egypt and Libya and Morocco and that area in there, they were able to have control of that. But when it come to moving further east, there was always something, an obstacle that prevented them. And the same thing when they tried to go northeast up into the Caucasus and into what we call Eastern Europe today. They were, the barbarians or whatever, as they call them, the Germanic people, stopped them. They never were really able to go up and conquer that area. And so there was limits put on them. And same thing with the Chinese. They controlled their whole area there, and at different times. But then they were, several different times in their history where they had huge civil wars and tens of millions of people were killed. And there was a time when China was way more advanced than the West. And you see they've managed to reassert themselves, and they're coming up again, and they're through this BRICS and the One Belt, One Road initiative, and they've spent, I think they say, about $8 trillion on this Belt and Road Initiative. Of course, some people call it debt traps. You know, they go to these little countries that are poor countries, and they all, you know, they show them all this money and these infrastructure improvements, but a lot of it's what they call the tofu dreg stuff. The roads fall apart within just a year or so. The railroads fall apart. I mean, it's real shoddy construction, and they get these people into these debt traps. And then they say, well, if you can't pay it, then we're going to take a 99-year lease on this territory or whatever where this infrastructure is, and we're going to control it. I mean, that's how they're doing it. And they've established these big ports and stuff. And I think the Belt and Road is just a preparation for the kings of the East to go into the Middle East when the time comes. They'll have the means and the infrastructure in place to move a tremendous amount of equipment and men. And of course the more and more countries are, you know, getting that. I think it was like 145 countries that have become a part of that Belt and Road Initiative. And then you got the BRICS, that now I think it's up to 25 or 30, maybe even more countries that have signed on to that. And there's another organization, Southeastern Asia Cooperation Organization or something, that also is joining together. And it's because the West, you know, has become so corrupted and so decadent and perverted that these people, you know, even though they may not be, you know, Christian believing or anything like that, even their moral standards are above ours now. It's where we used to kind of set the standard for the world as far as morality and you know, where the scripture says, you know, put other people, you know, you know, don't just put yourself first, you know, but consider other people's needs and stuff too. And we used to did. But as I've talked about, I think I've talked about it before, about how, you know, and rather than going in and teaching these people how to fish, we just give them a fish. As where the Chinese, they're going in there and they're teaching these people and they're giving them technology and they're building, you know, this infrastructure and all that stuff. As where the U.S. and the Europeans, you know, all we ever did is to keep them dependent. You know, throwback to colonialism whenever the colonial powers were over, you know, in Africa and in other areas, over in Asia and stuff. And rather than trying to lift these people up through helping them to be self-sufficient and to be able to produce their own food and to build their own industries and stuff like that, no, what we did is we go in there and we just give them food and give them stuff, you know, and never help them to be able to do for themselves. And so now, you know, these people are being drawn to that Belt and Road and the BRICS and all that because of their disdain for the West and their immorality. And so the whole world is you know, rallying against us, against the West, against America and the European, or North America and the Europeans. Pretty much they're you know, turning away from us. And of course you can't, you know, say that you blame them whenever you look at the U.S. and how it's declined. And the other thing I want to point out about my own personal self is I do not subscribe to any religion. No religion at all. I'm not a Catholic. I'm not a Christian. I am of the way. Okay? And that's all. Because the Protestants are nothing but a watered down version of Catholicism. That's all they are. I've studied the Reformation and all that stuff, and Martin Luther and Calvin and them, they were both Catholic priests. And so, yeah, they had just a couple of things that they disagreed with the Catholics on, and that was it. But they adopted all of their other pagan traditions. So, and they still carry them to this day. Sunday worship, Christmas, Easter, all of that kind of stuff, they still follow that. And that's the reason you can look back in America's history, before we became the United States of America, whenever the Puritans and all, they outlawed that stuff. They worshiped on the true Sabbath, and they did not recognize Christmas and Easter and all these other pagan holidays. They actually kept the Levitical feasts. And so, I'm trying my best to get back to that type of true worship of our Creator. And, and as far away from organized religion as I can get. Come out of Babylon, my people, and be not partaker of her sins, or receive of her plagues. The other thing, this Pope, of course, they call him the Black Pope. He's the first Jesuit Pope. And if you look up, do a little research on the Jesuits and what they are, the Order of Jesus. And of course, I personally believe that his Hebrew name is Yahushua, which means Yah's salvation. Okay, I try not to use Jesus, because I believe that is the false Christianity name of this Antichrist, or whatever you want to call it. But this Pope is going around trying to establish a law. They've been doing it. Sunday Sabbath law. But now they're calling it the Earth Sabbath. See, they want to make it so that, we're helping the Earth. Mother Earth. We're helping Mother Earth by taking a day of rest and not doing anything. But it's on Sunday. And the ecumenical movement, interfaith movement, the World Council of Churches, they all are coexist. The bumper sticker coexist, and it's got all these religious symbols on there. More and more and more people are jumping on that bandwagon. Okay, the false religion. And in Revelation, it doesn't say a one world religion or anything like that, but the implication of what it says is a one world religion, because the religion is worship the beast, the image of the beast, and the number of his name, or suffer the consequences. So it is a one religious system geared towards worshiping this Antichrist, and I think that the Pope is the false prophet. I just, his characteristics and the things that he's going around the world doing. He also went over to Babel, or Babylon, to the ancient site where they believed the Tower of Babel was at. And he met with the head imam of Islam. And they come to an agreement. And I believe that agreement is I believe that represents the green, the pale, sickly horse, death and hell, because it says that death and hell, death rides the pale horse and hell follows after, and they are given power over 1/4 of the earth to kill with the sword and with famine and with pestilence. Now, think about what that's saying there. People say, they're going to kill 1/4 of the world. No, that's not what it's saying. It's saying they are given power over 1/4. Well, if you take Islam and Catholicism, there's about 1.2 or 3 billion Catholics, and there's about 1.2, 1.3 billion Muslims. And you combine it, that's about 1/4 of the world's population. And I've told you this too, and you can do don't take my word for it. Go do your own homework, do your own research about the origins of Islam. Muhammad. First off, Muhammad was a white man. Secondly, his wife, she was Middle Eastern. But her and her whole family were all die-hard Catholics of the Catholic belief. And she was one of the richest women in the world at that period of time, which is somewhere around 600 AD. They try to say Islam's older than Christianity. No, it's not. No. But it was created, Islam was another front created to destroy the true believers, true followers of Yahushua. And that, because once they got up to where Muhammad began to conquer peoples in the Middle East, and once they got powerful enough and big enough power, they went across Egypt, Libya, and Morocco, and went up into Spain, Portugal and Spain, and all the way. They got stopped up at, I think it was in Austria, where they finally stopped them. And they killed millions upon millions of Christians, or people of the way. The Waldensians and the Albigensians. They killed millions and millions of them. Because the Catholics had already been pursuing these people that were of the way. They pursued them everywhere. And that's what the Jesuits are. The Jesuits are a group of assassins that go around and, one, they try to infiltrate Protestant churches, and they already were in there. I mean, infiltrated into them, but to bring in heresies and false doctrines. And if you just stand outside and look at these churches, and again, look at the schisms that are going on among these churches because of their division over their doctrine. One group wants to accept homosexuality and transgenderism and all that stuff, and another one's opposed to it, opposed to the ordination of these people as preachers or ministers and teachers and stuff like that, elders. And then you have other ones that are divided over abortion, some that are for abortion and some that are against it. I mean, I don't know how, if you claim to be a follower of Mashiach, that you could in any way ordain or sanction murdering babies in the womb. And, and it's even going beyond that. To California, they're trying to pass a proposition out there that would allow you to terminate your child up to 2 years old. I mean, and this is the how insane and twisted these people's thinking is. Now, you could take a woman that was pregnant and you shot her in the stomach, killed her and her baby. They would charge you for double homicide. But you yourself can terminate your own the life inside of you, and it's acceptable because it's a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice to Moloch. And you see, that's how the and I agree that the state should have the right to choose about the abortion issue as to what they want to do, because thankfully a bunch of what they call red states have made very restrictive laws and even banned it in a lot of states. But the way they're trying to get around that is with these morning after pills and stuff that they can, readily get that will terminate the fetus. And this is what I can't understand, and because the media suppresses it, but they have actually did in vitro or in the womb photography where they watched as the sperm went to the egg, and when the moment that that the sperm penetrated into the egg, there was a flash of light. It became a living soul. But they suppress that. And they suppress, and of course it's horrific. It is horrific to watch them dismembering a living baby in the womb. That's why they don't want people to see it. The mainstream media and the television outlets and all that stuff, they will not allow it to be shown. Because it is so horrific. And if these people saw what they were doing, probably a majority of the people that that wanted to get abortions would not get them. I mean, they literally dismember these babies, cut them into pieces, and pull them out. I mean, that's as horrific as of anything you can do. And if people think that judgment is not going to fall on this nation, it already is. And I've had somebody, I was commenting on another channel, Off Grid with Doug and Stacy. It was something, and I was quoting Deuteronomy chapter 28. I said, read Deuteronomy. Well, they said, oh, that don't apply to us. That applies to the house of Israel, the dispersed Israel. Well, who do they think that dispersed Israel is? I mean, it is absolutely a historical fact that the United States and Britain, the British Commonwealth, we are Manasseh and Ephraim. Read Genesis 48 and 49. Tell you right in there. So that declaration there, choose death, choose life, where Joshua went, over there was and had them standing on two different mountains. One was death, one was life. And they took an oath to keep that. Deuteronomy 28. The blessings and the cursings. Well, we're doing everything that the house of Israel was doing and worse. So we, think that curses ain't going to fall on us, then we are deluded. And then, there in Zechariah chapter 5, I've talked about the flying scroll and the flying ephah. They're seeing them all over the world. They're not hiding anymore. And people are seeing stuff everywhere. All kinds of strange stuff. And of course, Scripture says that we would. It would be like it was in the days of Noah. There was all kinds of crazy stuff going on back then, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on now. And it's only going to increase. And we're being set up with this political stuff, look at how that debate the other night with Trump and Biden, and, Biden's looked, completely demented or whatever, dementia, got dementia or whatever. I don't know whether he does, and that's all just an act. And all this is going on to promote Trump up and up. And I don't care what anybody says. Listen to the rhetoric around this guy and how people are almost worshiping him. And how he's on board with, And I guarantee you that the Ten Commandments that they're going to want to try to bring out ain't going to be the Ten Commandments that we have in our King James. Is going to be the Catholic one, where the second commandment they just eliminated altogether, and took the 10th commandment and divided it in, made 2 commandments out of the 10th. And in the 4th commandment, they totally changed that to remember the Lord's Day instead of remember the Sabbath. And so I think that, would you see what you see going on with Russia and Ukraine, over in Israel, that all of these things are going to be pushing us right up and maybe even push us to World War III. Out of chaos order, and I've talked about the letter of Albert Pike to Giuseppe Mazzini, and how everything that they had schemed up, that they actually implemented it, and it happened. World War I, World War II, and a lot of other stuff. The Russian Revolution in 1917, overthrowing the czars, all of this kind of stuff. The Chinese Revolution in 1948, they had a hand in all of that, in fomenting these things. And is to, according to them, is to, once all this plays out, people will be so exhausted, so wore out, so disillusioned, so disheartened that they will be ready to accept the pure doctrine of Lucifer. And that's their agenda. So, and again, I've talked about how, out of chaos order, that's what they're going to create all, and they are. I mean, you look at what's going on in this country, all the chaos, rioting, these mass killings everywhere, all these people coming across our border, just on and on and on. The weaponized legalism, and and I believe all that stuff is, and I've said it before, I believe it's kabuki theater. I believe it is all orchestrated. And, and the political system is orchestrated in such a way as to make you think you have a choice. When you don't, they're selected. Out of 40 million people in this country, that's all we've got to choice that we have for president. Anybody that, and you've got these other, and again, these things, they are there just to make you think you have some kind of a choice. You got RFK, and you've got Cornel Wilde, and you got, or Cornel West, and you got somebody named Oliver, and then you got somebody else. There's about 4 or 5 others that are vying for it. But those are there just to give you the illusion that you have a choice. And same thing over in Europe. I mean, it's all orchestrated, and if you look, there's this throughout the West, this move towards nationalism, Christian nationalism, and it's so the West is going to get caught up in this, and they're going to and they're using stuff like the environmentalism, climate change, and all that stuff as a part of it, as a part of this chaos. Even though they're the ones that are doing the stuff that's messing the atmosphere up and the environment, the weather, they're the ones doing it. I mean, and they're even coming out now, even on mainstream news, they're coming out now and they're admitting it, Because people have had their eyes opened up. I mean, people are looking. They see these planes flying back and forth, making grids in the sky and all that kind of stuff. Big X's, and I've even seen pentagrams before. Big star pentagrams that they put up there. Putting it in our face. And that's one of the things that they do is their symbolisms, they put it everywhere. They put it, whenever you have your eyes opened up, you'll see it. You'll begin to see these Masonic halls everywhere. And even little tiny podunk town, like here, there's one right down here, ain't even a town. And there's one down there. They're everywhere. And, the secret societies, the ones that are enlightened, the so-called enlightened, which I think was around the time that this nation was founded, was what they called the beginning of the Age of Enlightenment. And when you really started having the push towards heliocentric, they were really pushing the heliocentric cosmology and evolution and, getting away from the Bible and, all these universities that were established as Bible colleges or whatever, Yale and Harvard and, Dartmouth and all became secular. They got took over. They got taken over by these enlightened people. And because the Puritans began to diminish as time went on, they began to diminish in number and were not able to withstand the onslaught of the Illuminati and the Freemasons, the free and accepted Masons. And the idea of separation of church and state or whatever, or the religious freedom that we have in there, was not to protect Christians. It was to protect the Freemasons. Because they are considered like a religion. They are a religion. They worship Lucifer. And the same with the Catholics. They worship Lucifer or worship Satan, whatever you want to call it. They worship that, the entity that wants to be worshipped. And so you all of these organizations, which I don't recommend reading Morals and Dogma and any of the stuff from Manly P. Hall or Eliphas Levi and different ones, because whenever I've talked about that before, about the isms, that when you look at all of them, they all have tenets of the same stuff, same kind of doctrine, same kind of stuff in them. That's why they, whenever, like now, this priest, I think he was from over in England or somewhere, he's a Catholic priest, and he says, the protest is over. We're not, we're all worshiping the same God. Well, they are. But it ain't the same God that I worship, or the same Elohim. The Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. No, theirs is totally different, and that's why this coexists. The interfaith stuff going on, like there at St. John's Cathedral up there in New York. Every week they got a different religion comes in there and preaches or teaches or whatever they do. Every week, from a different religion, and the people there, they when they talk about this that this is the only way to peace. This is the only way the world can have, because they want to blame religion for the troubles that engulf the world. All the wars and all that kind of stuff. It's all because of religion, religious, differences. But really, it was, most of it hasn't been about religion. It's been about other things. It's been about power. It's been about land and territory and World War I, World War II. World War I was fomented because of an assassination. And World War II, it had to do with it, the underpinning of World War II was World War One. There was still a lot of resentment in Germany over how they were treated after World War One. And the hyperinflation that took over the Weimar Republic. I mean, where a loaf of bread cost you 3 million marks, 4 million marks. People pushing wheelbarrows full of money down there just to get a loaf of bread. That kind of stuff. I mean, it made it ripe for somebody like Adolf Hitler to come along and, that was charismatic and could speak, who also was a occultist, he was an occultist and he was into Vril and all that stuff. I mean, it made it ripe. And he had a great resentment about World War One. He was like a corporal or something in World War One, and he saw how they were treated after the war. Reparations and all the stuff that they made them do, and basically drove them into poverty. And of course, that created a huge resentment. And of course, these people, these Illuminists, and the Illuminati, that was their intention, and they were the power elite there in Europe. The money elite, the power elite, and they're the ones that all joined together and enacted this stuff against Germany, along with Woodrow Wilson. He's right there in there with them. Because again, they all are descended from King John Laughlin, so they're what you call blue bloods. And of course, I've talked about Trump. I've done a study on what about Trump. Well, when you begin to look at this man and look at his background, and he, how he, is cozy up with the Pope, but he's also cozy up with all these religious advisors he's got that are all ecumenicals. They're all, interfaith, ecumenical people. I'm going to tell you something. And he's also pushing for this, he's all on board with this Sunday Sabbath thing. And I've said this before, that is, in my opinion, that is the mark of the beast. That the chipping and all that stuff is just the enforcement mechanism. But the actual mark of the beast is Sunday worship. Just like the Sabbath worship is God's mark, His seal upon us. If you keep His Sabbath. He says, my Sabbath is a sign and a seal upon those who keep it. And I think that's why here in these last days, I believe we're in the last days, is because more and more people are recognizing that, just like me, I come out of that Sunday worship stuff. I've done that all my life. But as I got up into my 40s, I began to realize, something's not right about this. Something was telling me this is not right. And so I began to look into it, and I didn't, until about 7 or 8 years ago, when I really had my, my last chastisement, that I began to keep it. But I quit with the Sunday stuff. I didn't go to the Sunday, worship or anything anymore. And I'd quit the Christmas and Easter stuff almost 30 years ago. I knew it just, the one thing that got me was, I had grandkids, or step grandkids, but we were doing Christmas stuff. And one Christmas, we had been talking to them, kind of just picking their brain, to see what they really wanted. And so we could, be planning on it or whatever to get it. And one told us one thing that they wanted, and the other one told us what they wanted and all that stuff. And so we got that stuff for them. And there on Christmas morning, they're going through it, and well, I wanted one of them too, you know. And right then it hit me that this cannot be right. I mean, the materialism of it, the just, you know, and people getting stuff, and rather being grateful and thankful for it, they're, oh, I didn't want that, you know. Or next year, I've seen this stuff. You give somebody a gift, and next year when y'all have your family gathering again, now somebody else has got that, you know, they're giving them that present. I mean, they never even opened it, or if they did open it, they didn't want it. And so the next year they just wrapped it up again and put a sticker on it and give it out to somebody else. I mean, you know, it just can't be right. And you know, just the insanity of it all. You know, just grabbing and wanting, and you know, the materialism of it all. And that just kind of right then, it just, you know, I began to look into it, and as I began to look into it, I was like, yeah, I can see why this is so wrong. And the same with Easter. You know, I began to look into that and the origins of it and all that stuff, and I realized then, you know, I'm not doing that anymore, and I quit. And like I said, that was, you know, probably around 30 years ago. But with the Sabbath thing, I really just didn't go, you know, to church period anymore. I quit with it because I saw the stuff in the churches too, what was going on there, and, you know, this, I don't know, it was dead. I mean, it just wasn't no spirit there. And I just, you know, I said, well, I'm just done with organized religion. And so I wasn't really wholeheartedly seeking it like I should have been back then, but I began to look into, you know, started doing some research into how was it, you know, in the first century there, you know, when right after Messiah left and his, you know, apostles and, you know, the disciples began to, you know, what did they do? How did they keep their, you know, did they keep these things that Christ did? Well, they did. They followed the same pattern that he did. I mean, that's why he said he was the way, the truth, and the life. And no man cometh unto the Father but through him. Because he set the example, the pattern. And we have to follow that example and that pattern. And I know that the disciples did, because you can look, I mean, you know, and look at, you know, Paul. I mean, he would, at several different occasions where he said, hey, I've got to get back to Jerusalem because of the feast, because there were certain feasts that you had to be in Jerusalem. You know, I mean, if at all possible. There was exceptions to it where if you was just too far away that you couldn't make it, then, you know, there was a waiting period of where you had to be cleansed or whatever, and then at the end of that waiting period you could take part in it remotely or whatever. And then, you know, so we see how this religious system is forming right in front of our very eyes. And it's not just the Pope. I mean, you got all these people that are pushing it too. Joyce Myers, Kenneth Copeland, Kenneth Hagin, you know, Creflo Dollar, Joel Osteen. You know, you can watch his interview. You know, he was being interviewed, and you know, he kind of danced around the subject, you know, but in the end, he come out and basically said, you know, that all religions, you know, are seeking the same God or whatever. Well, they are. All of these false religions, I mean, they all are. That's why any organized religious system, I'd stay away from it. I'd stay away from it. I hate to say that. But, you know, if your eyes are open, you can see, if you go to any of these churches, you can see, I mean, you can see that they're not right. They're not right, and they offer the handshake of fellowship to these Freemasons and stuff. And even some of them are ordained and are up there in the pulpit. And they're elders. And the only reason that they're there is to go in and to bring in their doctrine. You know, the pure doctrine of Lucifer. That's why they're there. They're there to slowly bring in, and this thing is a generational thing. They you know, the banking cartel. You know, they you know, and they're all. I mean, you can see the interrelated, how all of these things are all interrelated with each other. I mean, there was a guy that constructed a pyramid that shows that same pyramid you see on the back of a dollar bill, what it actually represents. And it represents these, you know, we're the poor schmucks down here at the very bottom, you know, that they're taking our money and they're funneling it up to the very top up there. Their idea is to, you'll own nothing and be happy. Well, that, you know, that's not just a saying, that's what they're doing. You know, they're taking the sum of our sweat and labor, and they're liberating us of it every way that they possibly can. And the ultimate agenda is to own. They want to own it all, everything. And you got these companies like BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street, these great big asset management companies. I mean, like BlackRock's, you know, probably approaching 15 trillion under management. And they're the ones pushing the DEI and the ESG and all that stuff, you know, the woke agenda of forcing transhuman, you know, this transgender stuff and homosexuality, you know, own these corporations that they own huge sums of stock. And, you know, the idea of, just if you're not familiar with what stock really is, you're a company and you need money to grow. You know, you need money to expand your business or to develop new ideas and new technologies and stuff. But you don't have a big bank account full of cash. Yeah, you got cash reserves or whatever, but that's for your operations. So you go to the stock market and you sell stock in your company to raise money for your expansion and all that stuff. Well, you get people like BlackRock comes in and they say, okay, we'll give you 500 million or we'll give you a couple of billion or whatever, but there's a catch. You've got to implement this DEI and this ESG policy. You know, equity or environmental social governance, or DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what it amounts to is legalized discrimination against white males. When, you know, the idea of obtaining a position in a company should be based on your merit, not on your color. I don't care what your color is, your race is. It doesn't matter. It should be based on your character and on your capability. I'm not saying that people shouldn't be given opportunities. I mean, they may, you know, but they should be, okay, you got to come in at the ground floor and learn the business. You know, but if you already have the experience, you work for somebody else and you got the experience, doesn't matter if you're you know, black, if you're white, if you're, you know, Hispanic, if you're Native American, if you're Chinese, if you have the capability and you have the knowledge that they're looking for, the skills they're looking for, and the character, because that, you know, that's important too, people's character. But the way things are now, you know, especially at the corporate level, there is no character, and they believe it's okay to lie right to your face so that they can continue to promote their agenda. Even if they have, you know, have to take a break for a minute and back off, of the agenda they're pushing. You know, and there's been a big brouhaha here recently about Tractor Supply. You know how they backtrack, but the guy that is the CEO of that company and one of their big stockholders, he ain't changed his colors. He ain't changed his belief. He is still going to, at some point, they're still going to push this stuff. They're just going to figure out another way to do it. And so, but it's coming down from the top. It's coming down. Actually, it's coming down from the banking cartel at the very top that really owns all this stuff. You know, BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street and the others, Carlyle Group, they are all controlled from up there at the very top. The banking cartel owns them. And then they own all these other companies, these big multinationals. And you can see where they continuously consolidate. And back in, I think it was back in the 80s, the late 80s, there was a company called Texas Gulf that owned mines all over the place. They were also in the oil industry and stuff. They were from Texas, and they had an unsolicited, hostile takeover attempt by a French company called Elf Aquitaine. And the main shareholders or whatever of Texas Gulf said, no, we don't want to sell the company. We're going to keep it. And of course, you know, the people that control the shares of the company are the ones that have the final say in whether they sell or not. And of course, they said, no, we're not selling. Well, it's funny, those people, those main shareholders, you know, the chairman and the president and the CFO and all them were on a plane, and it just mysteriously went down and killed them all. And right after that, Elk Aquitaine took control of it. I mean, you can go back and look this up. I mean, how it all played out. But that's what I'm just saying is that that's been going on all along. And anybody that refuses to sell or whatever, they just mysteriously die or commit suicide or something. And then they wind up being taken over. Because it is the constant consolidation to where eventually you'll just have, for example, Bayer taking over Monsanto. You know, and they pretty much control all of the bioengineered seeds, and because that's exactly what they want. And see, any of that stuff that's bioengineered, they can patent and they control it, and they can limit who can have it and who can buy it and what they can do with it. And so, and they're making all this stuff so that it cannot reproduce, that it's sterile, so that you got to continuously buy their seeds. And so BASF or Bayer was one of the largest European companies in the agribusiness and stuff. And Monsanto was the largest American company in the agribusiness. And Monsanto had been buying up companies for years and years, seed producers and stuff, like Pioneer and DeKalb and different ones that they've been buying up all this time. And so now you got it down to just this one big behemoth. I mean, yeah, I'm sure there may be a few little, startups here and there that, but ultimately, Bayer Monsanto will go to them companies and they'll say, yeah, we want your technology, or we want your, and we'll license it from you. We'll pay you bunches of money, and these people will take it. I mean, that's what their objective is they start these companies up with the objective of making tons of money. Not that they're, out to help anybody or to make something better or to, make a better product or anything. And so, and they're trying to do the same thing with agriculture. They're consolidating it. They're driving mom and pop farms and stuff like that out of business, or making it so difficult for them that they just give up. And then you got like stuff that's like going on out there in Idaho. So all of this stuff going on. Then the medical industry, which is the big cash cow. That's the big dog. $3 trillion business. The medical industry. And since the sickness that I will not name, that come around 2020 there, here you have it. And now anybody that was truly in the medical profession that was willing to stand up for what was right, they've gotten rid of them. They've run them out. They've taken their licenses from them. And some of them they've even, have just disappeared, so to speak, in the ground. And not just them, but holistic practitioners. You can, if you do a little research on that, you find out all these holistic practitioners and stuff around the country, bunches of them have been killed or just mysteriously died because they were, helping people to get well using natural methods. The kind of healing substances that the Bible tells us that the plants and the trees and stuff are for are healing, and is what people used up until, of course, Rockefeller, and then they started the petrochemical pharmaceutical business. Up until then, even Bayer, for example, their first big blockbuster product that made them made Bayer the company that they became was aspirin. And aspirin is derived from willow bark. I think it's willow. And so, it was a natural plant-based substance compound that come from a plant. And so they began to synthesize all this stuff using chemistry, and that's why you have all these side effects. Every medication that they produce, and now it's biologics that they're the biological stuff. They still make the chemistry based, petrochemistry based pharmaceuticals, but they've gone to now whole hog to the biopharmaceutical. And God forgive me, but I worked in that industry. Not directly for pharmaceuticals, but I worked for a manufacturer that supplied them equipment. And I just didn't realize the remnant because we worked at a lot of these biopharmaceutical facilities, a lot of them, because they were sprouting up like mushrooms everywhere. Genentech, and Biogen, and Ajinomoto, and Novo Nordisk, and all these companies were rapidly getting into the bioengineered drugs. And I think it pretty much started probably in Silicon Valley, California, with people like Genentech and Amgen and different ones. And lo and behold, the bioengineered stuff is taken off. And I've talked about that as it was in the days of Noah. Unless you do the research, you're not going to, unless you really dig into that, look in the book of Jasher and the book of Enoch about what they were doing, they were genetically altering everything. And of course, you got some people that's going to disagree with that or argue with it, but I'm telling you, that's exactly what was going on. And he said, in Christ himself, the Mashiach, he said, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the return of the Son of Man. Well, what is going on? And what is the big push? And it's going to be one of the big pushes of this religious system, transhumanism. I guarantee you, that's a part of it, is being transitioned from being human. Same thing that was going on back then. That's why Noah was perfect in his generation, in his genetics. I mean, can't be any simpler than that. If it's not so, then why is it that we're seeing this explosion in this stuff? And it's in everything. I mean, you can only go in a grocery store now and buy anything that is packaged that doesn't say contains bioengineered ingredients. And people like Bill Gates buying up huge chunks of land out there, farmland. Why? Because they're going to be growing this bioengineered stuff. He's a big proponent of this here. Bioengineered stuff and this fake meat. Factory-made meat. Or, lab-made meat. And he has all these patents on this stuff. And he has all this money invested in these companies. And then not to mention the insect-based stuff that they're coming out with. The flour and all. And you really need to be looking at anything that contains flour, that cakes, chips, like these. I'm not talking about potato chips. I'm talking about like the puffs and the stuff that's really not potato based. It's corn based or wheat based or something like that. And you look on there because a lot of times, and they'll use the Latin scientific name for that cricket. It's crickets that they're making this cricket flour from. And it has chitin in it. And chitin is terrible for humans. I mean, the only insects that we can eat that doesn't have chitin in it is grasshoppers and locust. And the grasshopper and the locust is the same thing. It's just that a locust is when they're in a breeding frenzy state. They metamorphosize. But it's a grasshopper that metamorphosizes into a locust and they swarm and stuff. But you can eat them because they don't have chitin in them. And the scriptures tells us that we can eat them. But anything else, any other kind of insects, they have chitin in them, and that chitin is terrible on our digestive system. But they're pushing it. And of course, that's part of this bioengineering and this genetic stuff is that they want to genetically transition people to where they can consume this stuff and it won't harm them or kill them like it would a regular normal human being. And who knows what they tell you, the FDA says that there's no, that this doesn't cause any, harm, I mean, it doesn't cause any harm to you. Well, I don't believe anything that the FDA says because they're paid for, the FDA is paid for by pharmaceutical companies. Their budget and all that stuff is funded by pharmaceutical companies. I mean, talk about conflict of interest. So the FDA's interest is not in our health. It's in the health of their pocketbook and the health of the pocketbook of the pharmaceutical companies. And it's the same thing with, these things. Back in the 70s, they gave them an exemption from lawsuits for any of those, any harm caused by them. They had to because they were being sued through the Snozola because of their petrochemical pharmaceuticals that were causing all kind of harm to people. They had all these side effects and stuff and killing people. So the only way that they could be assured to make money and not be sued into oblivion was to pass this law that exempted them from being sued, and you have to go to like it's a vaccine board, court or whatever, and it's arbitrated. And the maximum that a person can get is like $250,000 or something like that. and they pay into that. These big companies pay into this fund, you know, for people that are harmed by these things. But they very, you know, when you're making like a certain company during this planned sickness, when you make $36 billion after tax profit off of this stuff, and you can't really be sued or nothing if it's causing harm to people. Okay, so you know, in the end, you got to pay a couple hundred, you know, and they got a fund that they've been kicking into for years. So that fund's flush, so they're totally kept out of it. And so you see how all corrupted it all is, and how it all ties together. It's not just random, isolated stuff. This is all stuff that has been planned. I mean, it is planned. And again, it's generational. It goes back probably thousands of years. The initial beginning of the planning of this stuff. And little moves here and there, you know. And of course, Elohim allows it. Of course, if it is going to go off of his plan is the ultimate plan, and it will reach its fulfillment. But in order for things that Scripture prophesies are going to happen, just like there with Christ prophesying things being as it was in the days of Noah. And of course, yeah, they're giving him marrying and giving him marriage, and they're violent, and they're killing one another, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And people are, you know, a lot of people today, their minds are toward evil continuously. But not to the extent that it was back then. And I believe the extent of it was back then, that their minds were, continuously focused on evil, nonstop, was because they had been genetically altered. They were no longer human. And that is what led to it, to them just becoming absolutely wicked. And that's what we're going to see taking place now. And whenever they're putting this stuff in this food, they can't tell you, if you approach them and ask them, well, what is, the possible effects of this stuff? This genetically engineered and bioengineered ingredients that you're putting in this food. What's the possible, harm that it could do to us? They don't know. I mean, that's the thing, is they're doing this stuff and they have no idea what the ultimate ramifications of any of it is. They're just doing it because they can. I mean, I've talked about that, about the chimeras. If you find out you can do this stuff, you think they're gonna just stop there? No, they're gonna take it to its final conclusion as far as they can take it. And I'm talking about making chimeras and that kind of stuff. They probably already have. And, I'm talking about chimeras that they have allowed to reach maturity. I'm not talking about, in a petri dish or something. And so, if they, and they openly have admitted that they were doing this research, they were creating these chimeras, and that they were viable. But they terminated them after 10 days. Well, I can guarantee you, somebody somewhere is going to take it to its final conclusion. Just like the cloning, with Dolly the sheep. You think they stopped there with just a sheep? I guarantee you they're cloning human beings. They have cloned human beings. So, and that's why, I really truly believe we are in the last days, that it's not going to be that far off before Messiah returns. and that we're like a steam train headed down, going down a mountainside full bore. And you listen to Russia. I mean, they keep talking about nuclear, and nuclear war. And the way that our leaders, our military people and stuff are pushing them, it's, to me, it's like they're trying to get this world war going. And that Russia, or Vladimir Putin, has had great restraint, because we certainly here in the West have done a lot to antagonize him. And here just recently, where they, the Ukrainians launched those Attack-A missiles on a beach there in Crimea and killed a bunch of people and children and everything else. And them Attack-A missiles, they come from us. I mean, that's terrorism. That's not war. That's terrorism. If they were going to direct them things at something, they should have directed them at Russian soldiers. But they didn't. They're using terrorism. And so I had no sympathy for them people in Ukraine, them military people in Ukraine. Because this is not the first time they've done that. They've done that kind of stuff over and again. I mean, I'm not defending the Russians either. I mean, I'm sure they've done their share of stuff too. But I believe they were pushed into it. I believe that the West made agreements with Russia about Ukraine and about keeping NATO out of Ukraine, and basically letting Ukraine be neutral. And we made two different agreements, the Minsk Accords. And of course you had people like Angela Merkel. She come right out and flat out said that they never had any intention of keeping those accords, that their intention was to go into Ukraine and NATO, bring them into NATO. And then you got all them biological labs that they found over there, where they were making biological weapons against the Geneva Convention. I mean, that just tells you, just how wicked and evil our government and the governments, the European governments, are. They will lie right to your face and say anything that you want to hear, and the whole time they have no intention of doing what they say. They're going to continue on with their plan, and they've been doing it. And of course, like I said, Elohim lets them, unless they start veering off from his plan. And of course, it's all to bring humans to the realization that we're incapable of ruling over ourselves. We are incapable of justly and rightly and truthfully ruling. That's the reason we need the Messiah to rule over us with a rod of iron, because we are incapable of it. It leads to exactly what we see going on right now every time. Because you have a small group of people, because it's not a big, huge group. Yeah, they've got a lot of people under them that they manipulate and use. But the people that are orchestrating all this stuff and running it all is a small group. It ain't a great big huge group of people. It don't take a huge group. If you know how to manipulate people, and of course use money. Most people are easily bought off. Especially you show them more money than they ever had in their life or seen in their life. Most people would sell their own mama out, And so we see this kind of behavior, and that's why they're able to do these things. Because of the inherent nature of humans, the corrupt nature of humans. Carnal mind, corrupt minds. All we think about is the now. We don't think about the future or what kind of harm that we'd be doing to somebody else. And if we were doing what Scripture says, I think it's in Philippians where it says, to not just consider your own needs and all, but consider others and their needs. And so, as it moves, this agenda, progresses along, true believers are going to have to unite. And, stand up. And I'm not talking about like trying to overthrow the government or nothing like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about we're going to have to stand up for what is right. And for those that are downtrodden. I mean, look here in this country. And I mean, it's come out there in California, all them homeless people out there in them tent cities and all that kind of stuff. They paying them people. They're paying them. They're giving them food stamps. They're giving them money. They're giving them drugs. Giving them needles. They're giving them everything. Bought them the tents and the sleeping bags and all that stuff. They create crises. And I've talked about that before. The Hegelian dialectic. Create a crisis. Watch the reaction. Offer a solution. And the solution is always tyrannical. It always takes something away from you. Some kind of freedom. And of course Benjamin Franklin, and of course he was a Freemason and all that stuff, a Illuminist. But he had some, legitimately true statements he made, and one of them is that, if you're willing to give up one of your freedoms for security, that you will have neither. You won't have security or freedom. Because once you give up your freedom for security, then you have no freedom anymore. So the people that are giving you security have taken your freedom, and now you're a slave. Are you any safer? No, you're not, because those people that supposedly are giving you your security are going to be the ones that are going to be terrorizing you. I mean, all you got to do is look at, communist China, communist Russia. I mean, the kind of stuff that went on there. I mean, how many of their own people they killed. I think all told between the two of them, about 100 million people. Are they any more safe? Are they any more secure because of it? No. They're less safe and less secure. Freedom is the way to, but freedom that is responsible, that is in Mashiach, that follows the guidelines and the laws and judgments and statutes of our Creator. If we do that, then nobody can take our freedom, because that is freedom. People think that, being free from the law, from Elohim's law, that's freedom. No, it's not. No, keeping his law, and of course the only way we can do that is spiritually. We cannot do it in the physical, in the carnal self. We can't do it. But he said he would write his laws on our hearts and in our minds. And Paul says, do we do away with the law? And he said, God forbid, we establish the law. Because we live it out spiritually. If we're truly in Elohim, if we're truly a part of Elohim, then we're going to live that in our day-to-day life. And it's not going to be something that we can just make it happen. I mean, no, it has to be spiritual. We have to be led spiritually to do it. But by the same token, we still have to keep it. And whether it's, the way that the Israelites did, and, in the physical, in the carnal, keeping, and there was those that were able to keep it. Maybe not 100% all the time, but there was. I mean, people like Abraham, David, Hezekiah, people that Elohim was greatly pleased with. Why? Why was he greatly pleased with them? Because they kept his laws and his statutes and his judgments. That's not to say that they didn't fall, that they didn't fail. Especially, concerning David and Uriah the Hittite. That was his real big blunder. And he blundered in other ways too. I mean, whenever he took a census and stuff, he was told not to do it, but he did, and it cost 50,000 lives. But I'm just saying that, I'm not saying that Abraham didn't never err too. I'm sure he did. But in his heart, in their hearts, they loved his law, they kept his law. And that's what we got to do. And the only way we can is if we love it. If we love his law and his statutes and his judgments. Read, I think it's Psalm 119, the longest psalm, the longest chapter of any in the Bible. And listen to what David had to say about the law and about the judgments and the statutes of Elohim. I mean, he loved him. That's why he was a man after Elohim's own heart. Because he loved his law, he loved his statutes, he loved his judgments. And if we do, then we'll also be after his own heart. But I want people to understand that, we're coming to the end of it. Well, and if you have eyes to see, if you're, if by the grace of Elohim, you've had your eyes opened, then you should be able to see, how all this stuff is, and, don't let them distract you away from the truth. Don't let anybody distract you away from the truth. Because everything is set up to keep you distracted. Political system, the sports, entertainment. I mean, everything is designed to keep you distracted and keep you away from the truth. And that's why, I don't watch sports. I don't listen to these entertainers. Very seldom ever watch anything on, that, like movies or anything like that. And generally when I do, they're old. Back during the time of when they had the, what do they call it? They have the code. You didn't have a bunch of vulgarity and cussing and I mean, even though them people, I don't know about a lot of the actors. I mean, they, when you look into some of them, I mean, they were no saints. But I'm just saying, if I do, it's going to be something that's clean. It ain't going to be none of this garbage they got putting out now, which is designed to corrupt your mind even more. Just to feed on, to feed more corruption into your mind. As if it ain't already susceptible to it. And so I would say, stay away from that. Stay focused on studying Scripture, learning anything and everything you can about it. And learning to love his law, his judgments, and his statutes with all your heart. And thinking about ways that you can, be prepared to help others. Because when this, this stuff is, things are only going to get worse. I don't want to be a doom and gloomer, but you got to be a realist. And the truth is that if you look around, and see, that's how they're going to capture people is, oh, this guy's got the answer. I mean, look at Trump. All these people that are, talking, oh, he's going to save America. Yeah. The only thing that's going to save America is for people to repent and turn away from their wickedness and to call upon the name of Elohim and Yahushua to change them. That is the only thing that's going to help this country. Is nationwide repentance. And I just don't see it happening. Because, they all promoting Christian belief and Christian values. But it's the false Christianity that they're pushing people toward. And, you listen to the rhetoric there, like say, oh, I just want the people to stop dying. I want peace. When I was president, there was peace abroad and prosperity at home. And of course, Scripture says, whenever they say peace and safety, sudden destruction cometh upon them. Because they're looking in the wrong place for their peace and their safety. Instead of looking to Messiah, the Prince of Peace. They're looking for some man. Some man that's going to be made into a god. So with that, enough of my political analysis or geopolitical analysis or whatever. But, I'm just trying to bring all of the bits and pieces together to show the bigger picture of what's actually going on here. And I mean, when if you get you some reliable sources that you can trust, which is very few, and I base it on they're honest, that the things that they have said and told proved to be true over and again. That they were honest, that they, truthful. And that's what I base it on, truth. And I, do my research, and try to see what's going on, even though the mainstream media, which is controlled by a 3-letter agency that runs it, drops their, because you can take all these news organizations when they all on at the same time, and you can put them up there, and they're all saying the exact same thing at the exact same time. Sound like a bunch of magpies going, because they're putting a script out. It's a script that they all read. And used to, you could look at the news, turn the news on, and there'd be a flash. There's this breaking news. You don't have that anymore. They stay strictly with their script. Because they're not there to bring you truth. They're to bring you a narrative. And they just keep pushing it. I mean, even when people know the truth, know that they're lying. But yeah, and they know that people know they're lying. But yet they'll still just keep pushing it out. I think it was Goebbels or whatever, the mouthpiece for Germany, their propagandist or whatever. He says, you tell a lie loud enough and long enough and often enough, people will believe it. And that's exactly what they do. They just keep telling you over and over and louder and often more and more and more and more. And people will sooner or later, they begin to believe it. So, you got to distance yourself away from it. I don't watch any of the mainstream news at all. None of it. And I'm very selective about what I watch, like on YouTube and stuff, as far as, people that are, I would say, internet news providers. Because ultimately, if they get big enough or whatever, they get corrupted too. They come to them and say, you're either going to go along with the program or we're going to shut you down, and you got controlled opposition like X, formerly Twitter. I mean, you think that Elon Musk is not a part of the system, the program? Be sorely mistaken, because I guarantee you won't get to be that rich and powerful unless you're a part of it. Ain't happening. They won't let you. Somebody like me, I don't care how hard I work, how smart I am. I could create something the best thing since sliced bread. And unless I was willing to go along with their system, they would just take it from me. I mean, and there's historically documented evidence of them doing it in the past, where somebody come out with something that they didn't want to get out, some kind of technology, some kind of, new energy source, new propulsion system, whatever, and they suppressed it, and the person that come up with it mysteriously died, or died under really mysterious circumstances, or they off themselves, conveniently off their, hung themselves off a doorknob. I mean, so, they're not going to get there unless they're, part of it. And of course, there's controlled opposition. That's the ones that they make you think is, because they got to have somebody there to make you think that they're on your side. And the whole time they're in league with them. And so, because otherwise they would have then shut him down. I mean, if he was truly going to buck the system and be, really make a true difference, they would have shut him down. Or he'd have never got a hold of it. He'd have never got a hold of Twitter to start with. They would have told him, stockholders or whatever, you better not sell that. Just the simple truth. Well, that's enough of my going-ons, folks, but think about it. Again, like I always tell you, be good Bereans, do your own homework, study and, see, you see this stuff happening right in front of our eyes. And I mean, it's following the biblical prophetic, script. It's following it. So, there's no getting out of it saying, it ain't happening, because it is happening right in front of us. And, and it's like I said before, people talk about, man, I'd love to live in biblical times. Well, congratulations. You're living in biblical times. You're living in it. And think about that. Think about that and what it means for you and your life and your family, and how you should be trying to draw closer and closer to our Creator and Messiah with every passing moment. Because that's the only way you're going to be able to stand. Put on the whole armor. And so with that, I love you folks. I appreciate you folks watching my videos. Appreciate any new subscribers, comments, even from Mr. Stanley. Appreciate his comments. I wish other people would join in and, voice their opinions about it too. What you think about what he has to say. I like I said, I listen to what somebody has to say. I have an open mind. I don't try to be dogmatic. But there is things that I believe, and it's not something I've believed all my life. It's things that I've come to know to be true, and things that even maybe I was deceived about. And I'm standing on it. I just don't see anywhere in scriptures that is contrary to it. And everybody's free moral agent. You're free to believe what you want. That doesn't necessarily make you right. And it doesn't matter how long you've been studying. I've been studying scripture a long time too. And there was things that I believed, when I was, years ago, that I just know now was not true. So it's not like I'm closed-minded to changing what I believe. that I'm not open to it. But there's some things that I believe that I've come to know to be true, and I'm not going to change. And and of course everybody's free to believe what they want. And but I think it really is an individual thing that ultimately we all have to come to that, to what we believe to be true. And the only way we're really going to come to that absolute truth is to, as Elohim says, when you seek me with your whole heart, then you shall find me. And when you find him, he's going to reveal himself to you through his word and the truth of it. And so I just am going to always admonish you to be good Bereans, study, and pray, and fast. I think that's important too, for spiritual clarity. And so with that, I love you folks, and I'll see you again on the next Shabbat if Yahuwah is willing.